Well, Nalo Hopkinson, thank you ever so much for joining me here in Southern California. And I guess the first thing I should ask you is, what is a Caribbean girl doing there?
Well, I was hired about 9 years ago now to be a professor at the University of California, Riverside. It's a university that is about 77% non-white.
Okay.
And they have a huge and amazing science fiction collection, and they have a creative writing department. So they were looking for somebody who was a writer, who was used to working with diverse communities, and who could work with the science fiction collection.
Wonderful.
Pretty much me.
Perfect. Yes. And whereabouts is Riverside in relation to Los Angeles?
Riverside is about 100 kilometers north. I'm going to get my directions wrong. If you go northeast from LA, up into the mountains, up into the desert, you'll hit Riverside.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And it is very much desert around there, isn't it? That much of California simply wouldn't exist if it weren't irrigated.
Yes, it is full on desert. It rains maybe 5 times a year. And when it does rain, it's flooding, like people drown in the mountains. Um, there are rattlesnakes and coyotes and lots of cacti and palm trees, which is very strange.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't sound quite as dangerous as Australia, but
No, no, yeah, Australia takes the cake completely, and a lot of the wildlife will not kick you.
yeah. Okay. So, I mean, these days we hear a lot about the issues that the USA is going through, thanks to the unpresidential person in the White House. So I worry quite a lot about my non-white friends who are living out there. How are you finding it? Is California relatively safe?
I wouldn't say so, especially not Southern California. I am in sort of a protected enclave, being a professor, university professor. So there's a certain amount of privilege that goes with that, and the way I speak, and the middle class airs and attitudes I have. But for a lot of the people of color, there's a lot of homelessness on our street and the streets that run perpendicular. There are about 7 families living in their cars, and they are all people of color. The police presence is frightening. I was talking on Twitter about somebody I know who's struggling with homelessness and who got turfed out of their car that they were living in by the police. And next thing I know, the police were tweeting me to try and find out more information about them. It's precarious, it's dangerous, it's disheartening. Um, I think the most disenfranchised people are the Black folks, but everybody, particularly people, a lot of people of color here are immigrants or families of immigrants, or they are First Nations, Aboriginal, and it's frightening. It's frightening, and there has been tacitly and not so tacitly more permission given to attack us, coming from Mr. 45, and so people are getting attacked more.
Mhm. Now, in San Francisco, a lot of the people of color communities are Mexican and Vietnamese. There's a huge Vietnamese community in San Jose. The African American people, I think, are mainly in Oakland.
Mhm.
Is the Southern California around LA similar in a wide mix of different ethnicities?
It's a very wide mix. I see largely Latinx people, and Asian, South Asian. Um, African American or African seems to be a much smaller percentage, um, which is so odd to me in a country with the history that the US has, but
Yeah.
that's what's happened. It's good to be living amongst this sheer amount of diversity, but it is also when that administration first came in, a lot of our students are undocumented. So the university had to go into gear to say, no, we are not going to let you get hauled off out of your classes. I don't know whether they'd have been able to follow through on that promise, but they realized it was important to at least speak to it.
Okay. Well, of course, one advantage of having all that ethnic diversity is that you get decent food. I mean, I would hope. I mean, as a Caribbean person, you are used to a little bit of spice in your food. Is Mexico sort of feeding that itch, as it were?
Thank heaven, yes, because Riverside is a small community. There's not a whole lot here. The better restaurants, I would say, are the Mexican ones. There are not many restaurants, but there are groceries that are run by people from India, people from Mexico. I can get my spices. I can get many of the foods I would cook back home. And I have often had people checking out the food when I go to the grocery say, how come you're buying our food? Because they think I'm American. And I'm like, no, from Jamaica. I know what to do with a pepper.
Yes.
Yes.
Look,
yes.
I know what to do with the pepper. It's not hard to learn.
No, it's not. And the rewards are many.
Absolutely. Yes. Good. Okay. So when I think of Southern California in terms of tourism, I think of like San Diego with the beach and the sunshine and the old town and whatever. And I think of Hollywood and Disneyland. Is there much else? I mean, there's the La Brea tar pits, which Kevin and I were discussing briefly, but is there anything else there to see, or is it just like Hollywood Uber Alles?
Oh no, there's a lot to see. I'm going to say not as much within Riverside, because again, we are, out in the desert, but there is a lot to see. San Diego is an hour-and-a-half drive away. LA, depending on what time of day you leave, can be anywhere from an hour-and-a-half to 4 hours. But because of all the communities that are there, because of all the history, there is so much to see. And you can go out into the desert and just be in that environment. There is an amazing place I have yet to go to called the Salton Sea. I wouldn't exactly call it a center of tourism. It used to be. It was an artificially created lake. In the 50s, it was a huge sort of beach community, but partly because it was artificially created, because it was in the desert, poisons leached into the water and the fish started dying off en masse. Apparently you can now smell the Salton Sea as you're approaching it. So there's all these abandoned homes, and as a science fiction writer, that's someplace I kind of want to go, because
your own private little dystopia.
Yes, complete with the skeletons of dead fish. But there is so much that I'm kind of blanking. There is the Huntington Library in LA and the grounds, and library makes you think of a building, but it was this huge, many acres donated by the Huntington family, who lived in something that to my eye looks kind of like a little mini castle. And the grounds have, there's the rose acre, there is the various types of plants, and they do amazing exhibits. One of the last two public events I attended was at the Huntington, where I was interviewing John Jennings and Damien Duffy, who did the graphic novel adaptation of Octavia Butler's Parable of the Sower.
All right, which I need to read.
They have a Jack London original that was destroyed by fire partially, so they're trying to figure out how to scan the pages. They have original works of Shakespeare. It's just wandering that place is lovely. And there are all kinds of little nuggets like this all through LA, because LA is huge. It's a county.
Sure.
And it's a number of cities that sort of restlessly amalgamated.
And millions of people living there.
Millions and millions of people. Yeah.
There are
So
more
there's
people
much.
living in LA than in the whole of Wales, or indeed Finland, which is one of the places I'm visiting on this tour.
Yes.
So,
Yes. Finland has about the population of Toronto, both living in and out of the country.
yeah, yeah.
Lovely place. I love Finland.
No, no. Yes, I'm very much looking forward to the Finland leg of the
Yes.
trip. So,
Yeah.
anyway, it's. I mean, as a Northern California person, I'm of course obliged to look down on Southern California. It's not your fault that you're the home of the Dodgers, but it does sound interesting, and I'm
Yeah.
sure there are things that are worth visiting in LA. If if only it weren't for the traffic.
Yes. The traffic, people don't quite grasp the traffic. And I still can't understand the traffic. The LA highways get used almost like side roads. And you can be stopped for just on that road, on that highway for hours. I do love the weather.
Yep.
I much prefer it to Northern California weather, but any California weather I'll take. Coming from
Yeah.
Canada, I'll take any California weather. Um, I love being able to hear the birds first thing in the morning. There are a couple of, I don't know what they are, that have learned different calls.
Oh,
Sometimes they imitate the traffic, sometimes they just have a range of calls. I love the odd range of flora and fauna because there's been so much imported here. So palm trees, why there are palm trees, I don't know. But because they get so tall and the branches will fall off in high winds, and we do get wind season, um, the palm trees along the highway, the city puts hair nets around them in certain parts of the year.
well, just count yourself lucky you don't have eucalypts. The California government was conned into buying large numbers of eucalypts to line the railway tracks in Northern California, and nobody told them that those things catch fire.
We do have them, not lining the highway, but
Yeah,
the university has a fair number, and sometimes the university smells like eucalyptus, which is so odd because it's an Australian.
it is. Yeah. No, they were deliberately brought in, as Kevin told me. So
Yeah, yeah. I
yeah.
remember reading that and thinking, well, they're pretty.
Mm, but they catch fire.
They do, they do. They're made of resin, resin surrounded by bark.
Yeah.
So one huge candle.
That's the last thing you want in California, really. But
Yeah,
there you go.
yeah, yeah.
Anyway, so thank you ever so much, Nalo. It's great to have an introduction to Southern California, and I will look forward to seeing you in a couple of days in Toronto.
In Toronto.